we're going to move on to the second episode now, and I just want to introduce a brief word about episode 2 of Learn, Learn, Learn. This particular installment examined the automotive industry and how technology is changing all the time. And in this episode, Henry Halliday provided a concise yet thorough look at this subject in a way that has perhaps never been done before, which made it extra exciting. So episode 2 also introduced many series hallmarks, which ended up defining Learn, Learn, Learn from that point forward. Now that can be said of really every episode, because as it grows and changes, everybody learns more on the production end, but episode 2, there was definitely something about that kind of said, okay, this show has arrived and this is going to be the tone of it going forward. So it was a very, very important installment. Now, there are some questions about this one, and I'll begin with what I think is a very blunt, pointed question, but an excellent one nonetheless. Henry, do you see electric cars taking over in the future at some point? If so, when?
Well, that's a tough question in the sense that there is no guarantee that a single process, whether it's electric, whether it's improved fuels, whether it's a new form of energy or something else, will be the only alternative that we'll have to cars. I think it's a very important aspect of the future, but not necessarily the right answer if you take cost, performance, utility as evolving also. Electric cars are still a strong leader, but there's other alternate fuels like hydrogen, biofuels, and even atomic alternatives that are still evolving. What do I mean by atomic? I mean things that involve nuclear fuel as a different way of doing it. But there are issues with respect to safety, again, cost, and availability that may make a difference. If we combine solar and battery, there are still a way to go, but no clear winner for at least hundreds of years.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Now, next question. COVID-19 has changed everything in terms of transportation. Does this invalidate or change anything that you, Henry, covered in episode 2?
No, not really, other than the aspect of socialization being the foundation, I guess, of our culture has been changed and is likely to change in the future, where we begin to recognize that the fact we do socialize so much changes the nature of how we greet and meet and get along. And whether it's transportation or entertainment or recreation or sports, it's going to be changed. Sure. Just because of the fact that we find the human is very vulnerable to things such as virus. And this virus has unique features that have challenged our medical community and our socialization community on how do we get along and how do we interact.
Right. Very good answer. Okay, next question. My car seems too smart for its own good. Sometimes I get confused by all the alerts and screens. Is this normal, or is it just me? It just doesn't seem safe.
You're very right about cars becoming more complex in terms of the issue has become our phones, our mobile phones have attracted all the interest at this point just because we have to pick them up, we have to look at them, which means we take our eyes off the road. But the question now is, all right, what about the display and these alerts? Now, some of the alerts are very important, like when a car is alongside of us and we don't see it necessarily in the mirror.
Sure.
Or when something ahead of us gets in our way and we don't stop in time because we are distracted just because we're humans and either thinking or listening to radio or something else and diverting our attention from full direction either ahead or behind us. So I think the part of the thing is that we people have to get more adapt to certain things that we don't let them distract us, but at the same time may recall our attention to things going on around us as opposed to some other distraction like thinking, am I going to get late to the movie, or am I late to dinner, or did I not pick up something that I was supposed to get at the store?
This follow-up question is loosely or even tightly tied to the previous one. Why is it okay to look at a vehicle's onboard LED screen, but we can't legally look at our phones while driving? There are apps, that is phone applications, made literally for car use, but if I get caught using them, I get a hefty ticket. I don't understand the logic here. Is there a disconnect between technology and law?
I would say yes, there's a disconnect, but it's an evolution process. When do you start to put the phone, because it's an easy thing to do. If you pick up your phone and you look at it, you have to look at it and take your eyes off the road. I think they've gotten a little carried away. If you're at a stop sign and you want to check the weather on your phone, okay, but then you got to be careful. If you don't move when the traffic flow is let to go by a green light, now you're interfering with someone behind you and he thinks you're going to go and he runs into you.
Right.
So the distraction of physically an entity which isn't there, as opposed to a screen which you can glance down without turning your head and picking up a hand and worrying about what I'm doing. Certainly, there are now phones, my phone, for instance, in my car, links to the car. So if a phone rings, I can answer it walking into the car. And whether that's also a distraction, it certainly is, but I can keep my eyes on the road while I talk.
Right.
So it's a question of a physical interaction with a device as opposed to a different distraction, which is something taking place on your screen in front or the road ahead of you.
Very good. That's an interesting perspective. Now, it seems like every year vehicle tech or technology changes drastically. What is an appropriate vehicle lease term? I am assuming that a lease is the way to go. Does it even make sense to buy a car anymore? And just a little side note on this question, before you delve into the answer, Henry. This question could really be interpreted two different ways. On the one hand, are they asking, does it make sense to even have a car at all? Or more likely, are they asking about finance versus lease? But why don't we approach it from both angles just to cover all ground?
Well, you can ask yourself, how am I going to get around with a car? We certainly have rapid transit, which is evolving. Here in Seattle, we've now got a people mover type train that's going to interconnect all our society in one area anyway. So it only makes sense if you want to get out of town or you want to go someplace that rapid transit takes you. And in terms of the finances, whether you lease or buy that is something economically you've got to measure by your own needs and whether you don't need to buy a new car every year. They're changing, but it's not such that unless you want technology, and I try to do that, but not every year, to buy a new car. It's a question of what does the lease cost you, and yeah, you can get out of it, but it costs you really more for use of that car than it does if you buy it and keep it for several years. Right. Whether or not you keep it for 10 years or 5 or whatever it is, really depends on what you're getting use out of it. If you're getting use from it from a recreational standpoint, you like to be on the road, you like to see the sights, then you're getting good use out of that vehicle other just to and from the store.